doubt our future, not because I'm searching for an excuse to leave. The truth is much deeper than that. The truth is, marrying you means saying goodbye to every version of myself that has survived by staying emotionally protected. People believe marriage is about choosing one person. I don't. I think marriage is about choosing one future while quietly letting thousands of other futures disappear forever. That realization has been sitting on my chest every single night, because once I stand beside you, there is no pretending anymore, no emergency exit, no emotional distance, no hiding behind work, no hiding behind success, no hiding behind the image everyone else believes. Only me, standing in front of the woman I love, with nothing left to hide, and if I'm completely honest, that scares me more than failure, more than losing money, more than building another company, because every problem in business has an answer. Love doesn't. Love asks questions that logic cannot solve. Future wife, have you ever noticed something strange about people? Everyone talks about finding the right person. Almost nobody talks about becoming someone capable of loving the right person forever. Those are completely different journeys. Finding someone is exciting. Becoming someone is terrifying, because becoming requires letting parts of yourself die, the selfish part, the independent part, the part that says, I'll be fine on my own, the part that believes needing someone is weakness. I spent years convincing myself I needed nobody. I became comfortable solving everything alone. When life became difficult, I worked harder. When I felt lonely, I became busier. When my heart wanted connection, I distracted myself with ambition. It worked, at least I thought it did, until you arrived. You didn't destroy my walls, you simply made them feel unnecessary. And somehow, that frightened me more than the walls themselves, because walls feel safe. Love doesn't. Future wife, can I ask you something? If you could see every conversation happening inside my head, would you still walk toward me? Would you still smile the same way? Would you still believe I deserve you? Because there are nights when I don't. There are nights when I wonder if one day you'll discover something about me that makes you question everything. Not another woman, not betrayal, not lies. Just the ordinary imperfections that nobody applauds, the fears, the overthinking, the moments when confidence disappears, the mornings when I don't have answers, the days when I don't know how to carry the weight of my own expectations. Everyone thinks strength means never shaking. I don't believe that anymore. I think real strength is allowing someone to see you shake and trusting they won't let go. That kind of trust, I've never fully learned. Maybe that's why I'm nervous. Not because marriage changes love, because marriage removes hiding places. When we say forever, we're really saying, I give you permission to know every version of me. Even the unfinished ones, especially the unfinished ones. Future wife, sometimes I imagine us 20 years from now, gray hair, slow mornings, coffee growing cold, while we laugh about something nobody else would understand. Your hand still finding mine without thinking. Our home filled with ordinary moments that somehow become extraordinary because we're sharing them together. When I picture that future, I feel peace. Real peace, the kind money never buys, the kind success never creates, the kind applause can never replace. But then, another thought quietly enters the room. What if I become the reason that smile disappears? What if one day, life becomes difficult, and I don't know how to protect your heart? What if forever asks more from me than I know how to give? Nobody prepares you for that fear. People celebrate engagement, they celebrate weddings, they celebrate beautiful photographs. Very few people celebrate responsibility, because responsibility is invisible. It begins after everyone goes home, after the music stops, after the flowers disappear, after the honeymoon ends. That's where forever actually begins. And that's the part I've been thinking about. Not the wedding, the mornings after, the ordinary Tuesdays, the quiet dinners, the unexpected arguments, the difficult seasons, the moments when loving each other becomes a decision instead of a feeling. Future wife, I don't fear the beautiful days. I fear the ordinary ones, because ordinary days reveal who we truly are. Anybody can love when life is easy, but who are we when life becomes heavy? That question follows me everywhere. Sometimes I wake up at 3 in the morning thinking about it, not because I doubt you, because I don't want to fail you. There is a difference, a very important difference. If I doubted you, this conversation wouldn't exist. I'm nervous precisely because you matter so much. The deeper my love becomes, the greater my responsibility feels. And responsibility has weight, beautiful weight, but still, wait, future wife. There is something I've never admitted out loud. The closer I feel to you, the more vulnerable I become before you. Loss was just an idea. Now, it has your face, your laugh, your voice, your dreams. Every future I imagine includes you. Every goal includes you. Every victory feels incomplete without you standing beside me. And suddenly I realized something that completely changed the way I see love. Love doesn't remove fear. Love creates something valuable enough to fear losing. That's why I'm nervous, not because my love is weak, because it has become stronger than anything I've ever experienced, stronger than ambition, stronger than pride, stronger than certainty. Future wife, if you're still listening, thank you, because these words aren't easy to say. I've spent my entire life trying to appear capable, trying to appear certain, trying to appear like the man who always knows the next step. But tonight, I don't want you to marry certainty. I want you to marry honesty. Honesty says, I'm excited. Honesty says, I'm hopeful. Honesty says, I cannot wait to build a life with you. But honesty also says, I'm afraid of not being enough, afraid of disappointing the woman whose happiness has quietly become one of the most important responsibilities of my life. And maybe that's exactly what love is, not becoming fearless, but deciding someone is worth facing every fear you've spent your life avoiding. Yet, there is one truth I still haven't told you, one realization that came to me late one night, a realization so uncomfortable that I almost convinced myself never to marry anyone at all. It wasn't about commitment. It wasn't about forever. It wasn't even about losing you. It was about discovering something hidden inside myself, something I had been running from for years without realizing it. And when I finally understood what it was, I couldn't sleep for the rest of the night because I realized my nervousness has almost nothing to do with marriage. It has everything to do with the man I become, the moment I finally let someone love me completely. Future wife, that night, after I finished imagining our future, I couldn't sleep. The room was completely silent, no notifications, no meetings, no deadlines waiting for me, just silence. The kind of silence that forces you to hear thoughts you've been drowning out for years. I kept staring at the ceiling, asking myself the same question over and over again. Why am I really nervous? I had already given myself every reasonable answer. Responsibility, commitment, the fear of hurting you, the fear of losing you, the fear of forever. Every answer sounded intelligent. Every answer sounded mature. But something inside me refused to believe them. There was another answer, one I had never spoken aloud, one I had spent years hiding beneath achievements, confidence, and constant movement. And the strange thing was, the closer I came to marrying you, the louder that hidden answer became. Future wife, have you ever noticed that life has a strange way of exposing the things we spend years avoiding? Sometimes it doesn't happen during failure. Sometimes it happens during happiness. Because happiness gives your heart permission to become honest. That's exactly what happened to me. You didn't create my fear. You uncovered it. There's a difference. A very important difference. For years, I thought I had become emotionally strong. I believed independence meant maturity. I believed self-reliance meant wisdom. I believed needing nobody meant freedom. People even admired that version of me. The man who always looked calm. The man who always seemed in control. The man who never asked for help. The man who always had another solution. Another plan. Another goal. But do you know what I discovered? Control can become another word for hiding, because when nobody gets close enough, nobody can hurt you. And when nobody can hurt you, nobody can truly love you either. That realization stopped me. Future wife, I don't think I was protecting my heart. I think I was protecting my fears. There's a difference. When you protect your heart, you stay careful. When you protect your fears, you stay distant. And distance slowly begins to feel normal until someone walks into your life and suddenly distance becomes impossible. That someone was you. You never demanded that I change. You never asked me to become someone else. You simply loved me in a way that made pretending impossible. That's why this scares me. Because you don't just see the confident version of me. You somehow notice the quiet version too. The version that goes silent for no reason. The version that overthinks simple conversations. The version that smiles while carrying invisible questions. Sometimes I wonder how you notice things I never say. Maybe that's what love does. It listens to silence. Future wife. One evening I opened an old box filled with photographs, pictures from years before we met, different cities, different apartments, different dreams, different versions of me. I looked at those photographs for almost an hour. At first, I smiled. Then something unexpected happened. I felt relief. Relief, not happiness. Relief because none of those younger versions of me had to risk losing someone they couldn't imagine living without. None of them knew what it meant to wake up worrying about another person's heart. None of them had someone whose happiness mattered more than their own comfort. Life looked smaller. But strangely, it looked safer. That realization frightened me, because for one brief moment, my mind whispered something dangerous. It was easier before love. The moment I heard that sentence inside my own head, I closed the photo album, not because it was true, because it sounded believable, and fear has a terrible habit. It always sounds reasonable. Fear never screams. It whispers. It tells you that protecting yourself is wisdom. It tells you distance is maturity. It tells you not to expect too much, not to love too deeply, not to trust too completely. Little by little, fear starts sounding like common sense. Future wife, can I confess something difficult? There were moments, very quiet moments, when I wondered if walking away before marriage would hurt less than risking heartbreak after it. I hate admitting that, because it sounds like doubt. It wasn't. It was fear trying to negotiate with love. Fear wanted guarantees. Love couldn't give any. Fear wanted certainty. Love offered trust. Fear wanted control. Love asked for surrender. And I stood between both voices, not knowing which one deserved to be believed. That was the hardest battle nobody ever saw. Outside, people saw progress. Inside, I felt like I was standing at the edge of a cliff, not because you pushed me there, because loving you asked me to jump without knowing exactly how life would unfold. Future wife, people think courage feels powerful. I don't think it does. Real courage feels uncomfortable. It feels uncertain. It feels like walking forward while every instinct tells you to stay where it's safe. Maybe that's why so many people confuse comfort with peace. They're not the same thing. Comfort asks you to stay the same. Peace asks you to become someone new. You brought peace into my life, but becoming that new man hasn't been easy, because every day I love you. Another wall quietly disappears. Another defense quietly falls. Another excuse quietly dies. And every time that happens, I feel lighter and more exposed at the same time. Future wife, do you know what surprised me the most? It wasn't realizing how deeply I love you. I already knew that. What surprised me was realizing how deeply I still feared being loved. Being admired is easy. Being respected is easy. Being successful is easy compared to this, because admiration sees your strengths. Love eventually sees everything. The insecurities, the exhaustion, the mistakes. The childhood wounds you thought nobody would ever notice. The parts of yourself you've spent years trying to outgrow. Marriage doesn't simply ask two people to live together. Marriage asks two histories to meet, two childhoods, two fears. two completely different ways of understanding love. And suddenly, I wasn't just thinking about our future, I started thinking about my past, about every lesson I unknowingly carried into adulthood, every disappointment, every goodbye, every moment that quietly taught me not to expect permanence. I never realized how much those experiences shaped me. Until I met you. You became a mirror, not showing me who you are, showing me who I still am. And some reflections are difficult to accept. Future wife, the strange part is, you've never given me a reason to doubt you. Not once. Every fear I've been describing belongs to me, not to you. That's why I needed this conversation. I don't want you believing you've done something wrong. You've done the opposite. You've loved me so sincerely that I can no longer hide behind old versions of myself. That's what scares me. Not because honesty is dangerous, because honesty changes people, and change always feels uncomfortable before it becomes beautiful. The more I accepted this, the more another question appeared. A question even heavier than the first one. If I spent years convincing myself that I needed nobody, then why does the thought of losing you now feel unbearable? Why does one person suddenly matter enough to completely rewrite the future I once imagined? That question stayed with me for days. Then weeks, I couldn't escape it. Every answer led me toward one truth. A truth I wasn't emotionally prepared to face, because I finally realized I wasn't afraid of marriage. I wasn't afraid of forever. I wasn't even afraid of vulnerability. I was afraid of becoming emotionally dependent on the one person whose absence could change my entire world. The moment I admitted that, everything inside me became quiet, not because I found peace, because I had finally found the real problem. And once you discover the real fear, you can never pretend it doesn't exist again. But what I discovered after that was even more unsettling, because it forced me to revisit a memory from years ago, a memory I thought I had completely forgotten. A memory that silently shaped the way I love today. And when that forgotten memory returned, I finally understood why commitment has always frightened me more than I ever admitted. Future wife, there is a memory I haven't visited in years, not because I forgot it, because I became too good at walking around it. Some memories don't disappear, they simply become quieter. They hide beneath your routines, your ambitions, your responsibilities. They wait patiently until someone finally loves you enough to wake them up. That's exactly what happened to me. The closer I came to marrying you, the louder that forgotten memory became. At first, I couldn't understand why. Why now? Why, after all these years? Why would something I believed was buried suddenly return? Then one evening, while driving home alone, the answer found me. Marriage wasn't creating new fears. Marriage was uncovering old ones. And the oldest fear of all wasn't that people betray you. It was that people eventually leave. Future wife, I don't know exactly when I first learned that lesson. Maybe it happened slowly. Maybe it happened in moments so ordinary they didn't seem important. Someone who promised forever and quietly disappeared. Someone who said, I'm always here. Until one day, they weren't. Or maybe it wasn't one person. Maybe it was life itself. Because life has a strange habit of introducing us to loss, long before we're old enough to understand it. A friendship that fades, a home that changes, a dream that quietly dies, a chapter that ends before you're ready. Little by little, your heart begins collecting evidence, evidence that says, nothing lasts forever. At first, those lessons seem harmless, but years later, they become beliefs, invisible beliefs, the kind that quietly shape every relationship without asking permission. I didn't realize I had built my life around one of those beliefs. The belief that if something becomes beautiful enough, one day it will disappear. I never spoke those words out loud. I didn't need to. I lived them. Every time happiness lasted too long, part of me started preparing for the ending. Every time someone became important, another part of me quietly stepped backward. Not because I loved less, because I expected loss more. Future wife, have you ever caught yourself enjoying a beautiful moment, and suddenly wondering how long it will last? It's strange, isn't it? Nothing bad has happened. Everything is peaceful. Yet your heart quietly whispers, "Don't get too comfortable." That whisper followed me for years. I thought everyone heard it. I thought everyone loved that way. Always grateful, always cautious, always preparing. Then you entered my life, and for the first time, I wanted to stop preparing. I wanted to stay fully, completely, without calculating an escape, without rehearsing goodbye, without convincing myself that distance was wisdom. But wanting something and knowing how to do it are completely different things. Future wife, sometimes I watch you laugh, not because you've said something extraordinary, just because you're happy. And in those moments, I catch myself doing something I wish I didn't. I start imagining losing that laugh, not intentionally. It just happens, almost automatically. It's as if my mind believes love should always prepare for pain. I hate that, because while you're living inside the moment, I'm already grieving something that hasn't happened. How unfair is that? Not to you, to us, to the life we're trying to build together. Because fear steals joy long before loss ever arrives, and I don't want fear writing our story. I want love to write it. That's why I'm telling you this. Not because I expect you to fix me. You can't. And honestly, you shouldn't have to. These are my battles, my responsibilities, my healing. I simply don't want you confusing my silence with a lack of love. Sometimes silence is where fear hides. Future wife, there was one night, a few weeks ago, when I imagined something that completely broke my heart. I imagined us years into marriage. A beautiful home, pictures on the walls, coffee cups in the kitchen, your favorite blanket on the couch. Everything looked peaceful. Then suddenly, without warning, my imagination erased you. The house stayed, the furniture stayed, the memories stayed, but you were gone. I don't know why my mind created that image. Maybe fear was trying to remind me how much I had to lose. Maybe it was testing me. Whatever it was, I sat there staring into nothing for almost an hour, because I realized something terrifying. The life I used to imagine before meeting you no longer exists. Every dream I have now has your fingerprints on it. Every future includes your voice. Every goal includes your smile. Even success looks different now, because success without someone to come home to doesn't feel like success anymore. You changed that, not by asking me to, simply by existing. Future wife, I used to think independence was the highest form of strength. Now I think connection is, because anyone can survive alone. But allowing another human being to matter enough to completely reshape your future, that requires a courage I never understood before. And maybe that's why I'm nervous, because you've become part of my definition of home. Home is no longer a place. It's wherever your heart feels safe enough to rest. Somehow, without realizing it, mine started resting beside yours. That realization should have comforted me. Instead, it frightened me, because I finally understood what marriage was asking of me. It wasn't asking me to sign papers. It wasn't asking me to wear a ring. It wasn't asking me to promise forever. It was asking me to stop expecting goodbye. And that felt almost impossible. Future wife, for years, I believed preparing for loss would make loss hurt less. Now I think I was wrong. Preparing for goodbye doesn't protect love, it quietly limits it. Because if one hand is always reaching for the exit, both hands can never fully hold someone. That truth hurt. It hurt because I recognized myself inside it. Ship, older than adulthood. Maybe even older than I can remember. I've ignored it for years. But marriage has a way of introducing you to every unfinished conversation you've been avoiding. And this conversation isn't finished yet, because after discovering where my fear came from, I uncovered something even more uncomfortable. It wasn't just that I expected people to leave. It was that a part of me had quietly spent years believing that everyone eventually has a reason to. The night I realized that everything inside me changed, and I knew I could no longer keep that truth hidden from you. Future wife, There is something I have never said out loud, not because I wanted to hide it, because I didn't know how to explain it. Sometimes fear doesn't sound like fear. Sometimes it disguises itself as responsibility. Sometimes it calls itself maturity. Sometimes it quietly whispers, maybe she deserves someone better. That sentence has visited me more times than I want to admit. Not because you ever made me feel inadequate. You never did. Those words were already living inside me long before you arrived. You simply loved me enough for me to finally hear them, and once I heard them, I couldn't pretend they weren't there anymore. Future wife, do you know what's strange? People think insecurity looks obvious. They imagine someone with no confidence, someone afraid to speak, someone constantly asking for reassurance, but real insecurity often looks completely different. Sometimes it wears confidence like a mask, sometimes it hides behind ambition, sometimes it works harder than everyone else, sometimes it becomes so successful that nobody ever notices the quiet voice asking, will I ever actually be enough? That was me. I became incredibly good at achieving things. Every goal gave me temporary relief. Every accomplishment made that voice quieter. For a little while, then another mountain appeared, another challenge, another reason to prove myself. I thought achievement would eventually silence that feeling. It never did, because the problem was never outside me. It was inside me. And love has a strange way of exposing problems success cannot solve. Future wife, the first time you looked at me with complete trust, I smiled, but inside, I felt something unexpected. Pressure. Not because your trust was heavy, because I suddenly realized someone believed in me more than I believed in myself. That realization scared me. I kept asking myself, what if one day I disappoint her? What if one day she realizes I'm not the man she imagined? What if she wakes up years from now and quietly wishes she had chosen someone else? I know those thoughts sound irrational. I know. But fear rarely asks permission before entering your mind. It simply arrives. Future wife, there was one afternoon I remember so clearly. We weren't doing anything extraordinary. No celebration. No important conversation. Just an ordinary moment. You smiled at me in a way that made time feel slower. Not because you expected anything, not because I had accomplished something impressive. You smiled simply because I was there. And for a second, I couldn't understand it. I remember asking myself, how can someone love me this easily when I've spent my whole life believing love had to be earned? That question stayed with me, because maybe that's where everything truly began. Maybe I never learned how to receive love. Maybe I only learned how to earn approval. Those are not the same thing. Approval depends on performance. Love depends on presence. Approval says, you're valuable because of what you do. Love says, you're valuable because you're you. I understood approval. Love, I was still learning. Future wife, sometimes I imagine our wedding vows. Not the words everyone hears. The silent promises nobody hears. The promise I'll make inside my own heart. I will stop pretending to be perfect. I will stop hiding my fears. I will let you know the real man standing beside you. That promise feels bigger than the ceremony itself. Because pretending is exhausting. For years, I thought people loved the version of me that looked unshakable. Then you arrived, and somehow you kept reaching for the version that wasn't. The quiet one, the tired one, the uncertain one, the one who sometimes doesn't know what comes next. You never ran away from him. You stayed. And honestly, I still don't completely understand why. Future wife, can I tell you something that embarrassed me? A few nights ago, I imagined us arguing, not a dramatic argument, not one that ends everything, just one of those ordinary disagreements every married couple eventually has. But my imagination didn't stop there. Instead, it skipped years ahead. It imagined distance, silence. Two people living in the same house, speaking less and less, smiling less and less, feeling more alone together than apart. The image broke my heart, not because I believe that's our future, because I realized something. My mind has always been quicker to imagine losing happiness than protecting it. Why? Why does fear create stories so easily? Why does love require so much more courage? I kept asking myself that, then the answer quietly appeared. Because fear believes disappointment is inevitable. Love believes growth is possible. Those two voices have been competing inside me for years. Future wife. Every relationship eventually reaches a moment where fantasy ends. The butterflies become quieter. Life becomes ordinary. Bills arrive. Stress arrives. Unexpected seasons arrive. That's when people discover whether they were in love with a feeling or committed to a person. I've thought about that moment countless times, and every time I do, I come back to the same conclusion. I don't want a perfect marriage. I want an honest one, a marriage where we don't pretend, a marriage where difficult conversations happen before resentment grows, a marriage where silence isn't punishment, a marriage where we remember we're on the same side, because life will challenge us enough. We don't need to become each other's enemy. Future wife, there is another reason I wanted to tell you all this before our wedding. I don't want you falling in love with an illusion. Illusions eventually disappoint. Truth doesn't. Truth gives people the chance to choose each other honestly. So here's the truth. I will make mistakes. I'll misunderstand you sometimes. I'll have days where I become quiet for reasons I can't immediately explain. I'll have moments when fear speaks louder than wisdom, but I also promise something else. I will never stop returning. Even after disagreements, even after difficult seasons, even after painful conversations, I will keep choosing us, not because it will always feel easy, because you'll always matter. Future wife, the older I become, the more I realize love isn't built during extraordinary moments. It's built during ordinary ones. It's built in small apologies, small sacrifices, small acts of patience, small conversations before bed, small decisions repeated thousands of times. That's what forever actually looks like. Not one grand promise. Millions of ordinary choices, and I want to make every one of them with you. But before I could truly believe that, I had to face one final question, a question so uncomfortable, I avoided it for weeks. It wasn't. Do I love you? I already knew the answer. It wasn't. Am I ready for marriage? That wasn't the real issue either. The real question was much darker. What if the biggest obstacle to our future isn't life? What if it's the version of me that still believes he has to earn love before he deserves to receive it? When that thought entered my mind, I realized my greatest battle had never been against the world. It had always been against myself. And the decision I made after that realization became the most important emotional decision of my entire life. Future wife, there was one night that changed everything, not because something dramatic happened. No phone call, no heartbreaking message, no unexpected goodbye. The world around me looked completely ordinary, but inside me, something was quietly collapsing. I remember sitting alone after everyone had gone to sleep. The room was dark, the city outside was still awake. Cars passed in the distance. Lights flickered through the window. Everything looked exactly the same. Yet somehow, nothing inside me felt the same anymore. Because I had finally reached the point where I could no longer lie to myself. For months I had been asking the wrong question. I kept asking,